Italian and a certificate in Central and Eastern European history. After receiving his commission as a second lieutenant, he completed the basic school and infantry officer course. He was awarded the Lieutenant Colonel Vic Taylor Major General Edwin B. Wheeler Award for being the distinguished graduate of the Marine Corps Infantry Officers Course, class of 2008. In 2008, he deployed to Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. In 2010, Professor Sala was selected for service as judge advocate through the Excess Leave Program. He attended Vermont Law School, graduating with a Juris Doctorate, cum laude, and a Master's in Environmental Law and Policy, magna cum laude. He was also the recipient of the 2010 Maximilian W. Kempner Award, which Vermont law presents to the student who best embodies civility, integrity, fairness, and public service. As if that wasn't enough, in 2016, Professor Sala was selected to serve as an assistant professor and Marine officer instructor at the University of Rochester, where he earned a master's in business administration from the University of Rochester's Simon Business School. Upon retiring, Professor Sala joined the Civil Law Division of the New Hampshire Department of Justice and served as the attorney for the Commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Education. In 2019, he joined Vermont Law School's faculty as assistant director of the Academic Success Program and an assistant professor of law. In 2021, Professor Sala was appointed the interim director of the Academic Success Program. Professor Sala currently teaches bar exam skills and tactics, legal methods, national security law, military justice, and constitutional law. He is also the faculty advisor to the Vermont Law School chapter of the Federalist Society and Phi Alpha Delta. He is a member of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the state of New Hampshire, United States District Court of New Hampshire, and United States Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces bars. In 2021, New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu nominated Professor Sala to serve as a member of the New Hampshire State Board of Education. The New Hampshire Executive Council approved Professor Sala's nomination in February 2021. Let's see. Next up is Commissioner Edelblut. So,
You don't have to read them all. We gotta get to the questions.
We're going to get there. Yes. Frank Edelblut is the Commissioner in the New Hampshire Department of Education. He attended University of Rhode Island, where he earned a Bachelor of Science, Business Administration, Accounting. He also holds a Master's in Theological Studies from Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology. Commissioner Edelblut has been married for 36 years and has 7 children. 5 are college graduates. 1 is currently in college and 1 is still at home, being home educated. He and his wife also have 6 grandchildren. Commissioner Edelblut is a businessman who started his career as a certified public accountant with a large international accounting firm. He briefly worked as a chief financial officer for a public company and then took the entrepreneurial plunge, starting his own company, which was sold to a French firm in 2009. Mr. Edelblut continues to be active as an investor in early stage companies across a range of industries, including technology, med tech, and even a wine company. Commissioner Edelblut was a Republican member of the New Hampshire House of Representatives. During his term in the House, he served on the Finance Committee, the Special Committee on Pensions, and the Child and Family Law Committee. Frank Edelblut was sworn in as Commissioner on February 16th, 2017. The Commissioner is responsible for the organizational goals of the department and represents the public interest in the administration of the functions of the Department of Education. The Commissioner is responsible to the Governor, the General Court, and the public for such administration. In his role as Commissioner, Mr. Edelblut serves on a number of boards, including as a trustee to the University System of New Hampshire, a member of the New Hampshire Higher Education Commission, a member of the National Assessment Governing Board, among others. Commissioner Edelblut has a vision to make education accessible to everyone. Commissioner Edelblut has stated, and I quote, "The equity gap is too large, and it has persisted for too long. Everything needs to be on the table as we consider how to improve educational outcomes for all students." Last but certainly not least is the Honorable Glenn Cordelli. New Hampshire State Representative Glenn Cordelli currently hails from Tuftonboro and represents Ossipee, Tuftonboro, and Wolfboro. Representative Cordelli and his wife have 3 grown children. Representative Cordelli served multiple terms on his local Board of Education and Finance Committee in Connecticut before moving to New Hampshire. Representative Cordelli is currently serving his 6th term in the New Hampshire House of Representatives and is the Vice Chair of the House Education Committee. Representative Cordelli has served in the New Hampshire House of Representatives to the New Hampshire Home Education Advisory Council and the New Hampshire State Advisory Committee on the Education of Children and Students with Disabilities. Representative Cordelli has been a tireless advocate for expanded school choice opportunities and programs for New Hampshire students and their families. I have had the great honor and privilege to serve with Representative Cordelli for the past 6 years and have found him to be very knowledgeable and a great resource as a sounding board on topics of New Hampshire public education. Now, without further ado, I will turn it over to our panelists to provide us with their introductory remarks before we begin the question and answer portion of our program. For that, we'll start off with Professor Sala.
Thank you. When I sent that bio over, I really thought I sent over the abbreviated version. And as I was sitting here, while I was sitting here listening to it, I was like, wow, I'm so sorry, everybody. We could have just stopped at the Marines. This is the best part of my life was serving in the Marine Corps. I served for 21 years. It was an amazing experience. I wish I could go back, but it turns out I don't think I'm old, but I'm old for the Marine Corps. So thanks so much for having me. It's my first time in Deerfield. I appreciate it. I know at some point we'll get to talking about school choice options in New Hampshire, but I'd like to start out just by talking about why I care about it at all. Like I said, I retired in 2018. I moved here with my wife. I have a daughter. She's 14. I have a son. He's 7. They both go to public schools here in New Hampshire. But the reason when I first got out that the first job I applied for was this position, was a position with the New Hampshire Department of Education is because I love public education. I'm a product of public education. I definitely would have taken out the part about being from Queens, New York, if I had thought more about it. But you'd have figured it out just by me talking. So, I'll just keep it short and say, I grew up in a rough household, single mother family. My stepfather came later on, but through a long series of events, I ended up in a boys' home. And I really did not have any direction at all. My biggest hope at the time was to finish up my time in the boys' home that I was in and get back to the streets so I could get back to hanging out with my friends. But I had a teacher. Her name was Marlene Leventhal. She's an amazing woman, still lives in New York. I still stay in contact with her. Right before I retired, a couple of years before I retired, when I was promoted to major, she drove from New York City to Rochester, New York, which is no small feat, to be there at my promotion. So this is a woman I really value. And about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, someone reached out and they were writing a book called Standing O. It was called Salute, Standing O. And they asked me to write a chapter about someone that was influential in my life. And I've had a lot of influential people in my life, but I chose to write about this teacher because she taught me that education was the key to getting out of the area that I was in or the life that I was living. And it never left me. And that is why throughout my entire Marine Corps career, I pressed for more education. I would not have made it out of public school if it wasn't for her. I went on to go to college when I was there. It's kind of funny when I hear all those degrees, but the reason that I actually have those degrees is because she told me, one of the pieces of advice I got was, when you go to college, don't change your major. Everybody changes your major, and by the time you're done, you will have settled for something instead of choosing it. And so every time I found something interesting, I just tacked it on. I was like, oh, I'm not supposed to change my major, so I'm going to do this one too. So everything that I understood from my time with her was, if you continue to improve your educational situation, you will be more successful. And I've always thought that was true, and I tell my kids that. That kind of leads me to why I come out every time I'm asked to talk about school choice. And I just want to make it clear, I think it's important that being an advocate for school choice is not an indictment on public schools. I love public education. what it is, two things really that I think about when I think about school choice. The first one is every student deserves an education that's unique to their needs, that's free of the encumbrances of economic status or your background. And the second reason that I favor school choice is it's to reinforce the parental or the guardian role as the primary decision maker and moral authority in the life of a child. So that's all I have for my opening, but that's why I care about school choice and why I'm here tonight. Thanks.
Great. Thank you and good evening. And thank you all for coming out today. I love listening to Rich's story and hearing of, his journey to where he is today, which listening to that bio every time, I've heard it before, and it's an impressive bio. I thought Glenn and I were going to be like, we can just leave now. But it's because of stories like Rich's that I'm passionate about education, among different things as well. But Rich has a great story, and it's encouraging to hear that story. Turns out that's not the story for too many kids, right? So Rich grew up in a tough neighborhood, in a tough household, didn't have a lot of supports and advantages. And because of a great teacher, because of circumstances in his life, he was able to find a pathway to where he's now talking to you this evening. But if you look more deeply at education across the country and over time, what you'll find is that we have left too many students behind. I'm going to use a military analogy this for you, Rich. We're not willing to leave any soldiers on the field or any students on the field, so to speak. And what we've seen in education over the years is it's kind of a phenomena. If you look at kind of assessment results and trends, what you'll find is over the past 50, 30 years, what has been happening in education is the academic performance results are pretty flat, right? There's been some slight upcreases, some slight downcreases, but generally fairly flat in terms of the attainment of those students at a level that is generally less than 50% proficient in the things that we want students to learn. But the problem is, if you look at those statistics, it doesn't tell the whole story, but you kind of have to begin to pull the data apart and see what's going on underneath. And what you'll find is that students that come from, I'll use a term, an advantaged household, which is a household where there are, strong family supports, there are support infrastructures for those kids. Those students are holding their own and doing a little bit better. They'll see some growth over time. That would be our top quartile students, right? So the top 25%, say. But if you look at the bottom quartile percent of students, the bottom 10%, the bottom 25%, what you're going to find is that those students are falling away. And I have a line that I like to use. Sometimes it angers people when I use it, but it's the reality of the system that we're looking at. And that is that this system, which is designed to be the great equalizer so that people like Rich Sala can grab hold and can succeed, this system is supposed to be the great equalizer, is actually becoming more and more a divider as you see students falling behind. And part of the kind of the drive and what's happening there is that some of those students without some of those support structures are not accessing their education. They're not able to engage it. And so this is one of the reasons why choice is so important to me, is that I think that every kid is a great kid. I think that every kid has a bright future. I think that kids in Queens who are in boys' homes, and many people have written them off, have a bright future. But what we have to do is we have to find the pathway for them to get there. And so that's really where choice comes into play for me. And oftentimes when we have this choice conversation, we talk about like a good school and a bad school. Well, did you go to a good school or did you go to a bad school? Or is this a good school or is this a bad school? I'm sure that you've all heard that vernacular used before. I think when we say that, we're asking the wrong question. instead of asking, is this a good school? We should ask, or is it a bad school? Can we ask, is this the right school for that child? Because I can tell you, just even in a conversation last week with one of my division directors at the Department of Education, we were talking about her education trajectory. Again, a similar story to Rich Sala in terms of having a difficult circumstance, but even in a bad school, she was able to learn because it was the right school for her. And then we also know that I can go to some of the best schools in New Hampshire, and I can find kids that are not succeeding because it's not the right school for them. So what we have to do is let's pivot this conversation about schools from being focused on where the learning is taking place and focus it on the children and figure out how children are going to be able to move forward and have success. And what's really interesting is, I mean, we've seen across the country this idea of choice. It's a tsunami, right? Like there are 34 states right now across the country that are contemplating, they've already either got some type of choice programs in place or they're contemplating additional choice programs. So it's not like this little thing that's happening up in New Hampshire, although I'm happy to talk and I will share a little bit about some of the things that we're doing in New Hampshire relative to choice, but it's happening all across the country. And that's because more and more parents, and maybe it's because of the COVID pandemic and the foray into remote instruction, are seeing the instruction up close, and they're saying I don't know if that's the right instruction for my child. And so they're saying, I need to have options to make sure that my child can succeed. And so kind of as this, evolves, you want to keep in mind that it's the child that has to be in the forefront. Now, in New Hampshire, we've got quite a few educational options that are available to our students, mostly because of the legislature. Thank you, Glenn. And I'll try not to take too much of your thunder. I don't know. He has to go last, the poor guy. But we've got a lot of stuff. We're trying to create more and more options for students. And when we have the conversation about options, we really want to, not have, and it oftentimes results in this, it's like an either or circumstance. Like, well, we either do this or we do that. Choice has to be, and I appreciate your supporting the public schools. I too support the public schools. If you see all of the programming that we put in place, because I want these kids to thrive in every single environment that they can be in. And so it's really, it's not an either or, it's a both and, because we're searching for that right option for the students. And one of the things when I think about that both and is that applies to my public schools as well, right? Like public schools, what we want to be careful of is to not, in our conversations and our positions about this, calcify the public schools and say that they're not able to change. Our public schools can change and offer choices to families just the same way somebody who is not part of that public school. And so what we really need to do is, as we focus on the students, we are able to see the importance of building these opportunities. So let me list a couple that we've got here in New Hampshire. We've got the scholarship organization, which basically provides scholarships to low-income families in New Hampshire that need a different option. We've got charter public schools in New Hampshire. Many people, and I hear this even at the legislature sometimes, charter schools in New Hampshire are public schools. They are open enrollment public schools in the state of New Hampshire. They are not some competing entity. They are public schools. We've got education freedom accounts for students to be able to choose an educational option that the family thinks is the right thing for them. We've got open enrollment schools, which is basically any public school can declare themselves an open enrollment school. And when they do that, towns can tuition those students into those schools without tuition agreements, and they have access to those schools. We've got innovation schools. Again, to credit to Glenn, who introduced that bill and put it in place, which is basically, it's to allow our public schools to be creative and to innovate and create these choices. So any public school that is concerned that there's some type of rule or regulation, like these are the education laws, these are just the education laws in the state of New Hampshire. But if one of these is getting in the way of a public school from getting the job done, of meeting the needs of students, they can apply for an innovation waiver and be granted a waiver to be able to say, they can come and say, like, we think we can serve the students better like this, and they can get that approved. And then we've got a variety of tuition programs throughout the state where we've got districts tuitioning children to all kinds of educational options so that they can be successful. So I'm looking forward to the conversation tonight. I'm looking forward to answering all of your questions, and thank you so much for coming out.
First, thank you for putting this on. Thank you for this great crowd coming out. I know that you're facing some decisions coming up in the very near future. But let me backtrack a little bit in that I went to public school. My 3 kids went to public school. I've never been an educator. Well, I taught Sunday school for a little while, but that's about it. But I got involved in education because my youngest daughter, this was 30 some odd years ago, in elementary school, came home crying from school one day. Asked her what's wrong. My teacher made me lie to the class. The teacher gave her a card that said, she had to read it to the class, "I am easily achieving all my goals." And my daughter knew she was struggling. And this upset her so that she came home crying. So I decided I've got to get involved. So I ran for the school board, and the rest is history, as they say. But being on the House Education Committee has been a fantastic experience. When I first got elected, we can choose what committees we want. We get a choice of, you can put down first, second, and third choices for what committee you want to be on. So I put down education, education, and education. And I got on the education committee and have been there ever since. But when I talk about school choice, the thing that really sticks in my mind, Thomas Sowell, a famous author and writer, and he once said, the basic question is not what is best, but who says what is best. And my humble opinion, it's not any one of these gentlemen, it's you people, it's parents. You know what's best for your kid. And that's what we have to keep in mind. And that's why I am so passionate about some call it school choice. I call it education freedom. This is the live free or die state. So, it's all about freedom and school choice. You think it's a choice of what school you want to go to, but with education freedom and our education freedom accounts, you've got choices. As a parent, you can send your child to a private school, to a different public school outside of your own district, to a charter school, or a whole range of options that best meets your child's needs. Anything from online courses to tutors, to rehabilitation therapies, you name it. So I think that New Hampshire really has been in the forefront of the school choice education freedom movement. We weren't the first state to have education freedom accounts or education savings accounts, but we were one of the leaders in it 2 years ago when we passed our education freedom accounts. And as the commissioner said, there are a number of states now all across the nation that are following suit. And if you talk to national experts, they point their finger at New Hampshire to helping start the ball rolling in this regard. There are 6 states right now, I think 2 have already passed it and have signed into law, universal education freedom accounts. I mean, anyone can in the state, regardless of income, can get an education freedom account. So this march toward education freedom across the nation is snowballing and is picking up steam. And I think they won't put the cap back in the bottle on this one. It's a grassroots movement, really led by parents. And as the commissioner said, the commissioner has done a lot, and the legislature has done a lot for education freedom, but also for public schools. It's important. He talked about innovation in public schools. We've done a lot for special needs children. One of the things that has touched me the most, we have had several pieces of important legislation in the past couple of terms for children with disabilities. And to hear the stories of those parents coming in to talk about trying to get services for their children, families going bankrupt, trying to get services for their children. We have to do better for those children, but for all children in New Hampshire. Every child learns differently and every child is unique. And I think that's the thing that we have to keep in mind and make sure that they get the education that they need.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, gentlemen. Very good remarks. So the good news, the really good news is we are already ahead of schedule. And that means that there's more time for question and answers, because the real purpose, the real intent of having this event tonight is to have people ask questions about anything and everything New Hampshire school choice, and get, an authoritative an answer to that. And so now the pressure is off of me, except for closing remarks. The script is off to the side, and I would invite you to please step up to the table again. And we've got a Deerfield resident coming up now. She's old hat at this. She knows the program. She is going to demonstrate the proper way. She's going to state her name. She's going to tell us she's from Deerfield.
You
And
saw
then
me creeping up, right? You
I
knew
did,
was
and I
coming.
appreciate it.
Yes.
The first domino is always the hardest one to get
Yeah.
going. After that, they should all
Yeah.
take right off. So please.
So my name is Bernie Cameron, and I do live in here in Deerfield, have been for 50 years. So I just wanted to be sure that I understand this. Is this work?
Yeah, you have to hold the mic very close,
Okay.
Bernie. Sorry.
Okay, so can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I just want to be sure that I understand this. If someone is going to Concord High School, if the contract is signed, they still can opt to go to private school instead, correct? That's what I have read, that the school will still allow children to be homeschooled or go to private school, even though the school will have a contract with Concord High School. Is that correct?
Okay, so I'll defer it to our panelists after, but I don't think they're quite facile in the contract. My understanding of the contract is that we commit 90% of Deerfield students to go to Concord High School. That 90% is referring to students that attend public school. Any family can choose to remove their child from the public education system in New Hampshire and either homeschool or send to a private school. But under those circumstances, the family would pay the full
Right.
tuition.
So in my understanding, because I think it's a little different than yours, is they have to send 90% of the students minus the students that have already chosen homeschool or private school. It's the remaining 90% that then can attend another, and the remaining 10% after that then can attend a different public school, but they would have to show proof of hardship. That
Yeah.
other 10%.
Yeah, so
But the others already have the choice, which you have been talking about now for a while, of school choice. So a contract with Concord High School would not remove a family's option to send their children to a private school or homeschooling. That would not affect the 90%. If
That-
anyone from the
okay,
school board is
okay,
here
so
who's
hold on.
different,
So
I don't
we
think so.
understand the question, and
Yeah.
I'm going to give you the answer because I know the answer. You're correct. Once a child is pulled from the public school system, they are no longer part of the pool to which the contract
Correct.
refers.
Correct.
Absolutely. That's correct.
All right. So no matter how the vote is taken, if we have a permanent a 20-year contract with Concord High School or we don't, that does not affect the ability of anyone here
No,
to send
No,
their children
what it does
to
what
a
it- what
private
it-
school.
What it does affect is it affects the amount of children that could select other options using taxpayer funds, right? So
Well,
that's
because the 10% would be a little smaller. Is that what you're saying?
It-
That remaining
the-
10% would be a
so
little
if
smaller.
if you imagine an average class size in Deerfield of 50 students,
Yeah.
right, just as a round number,
Right. And
that-
say you're
that-
left with 40.
that means 5 kids out of the 50 could potentially go somewhere else if they get approved through manifest hardship /
Right.
best interest of the child.
Right.
Correct.
Exactly. Okay. I wanted to clarify
you.
that. So I would hope that at some point we are also going to talk about if the town does not sign a 20-year contract with Concord, which are the other remaining public schools in the area that will agree to take Deerfield children?
Yeah, and that's a discussion that the community will certainly be having between now and March 7th.
Has that been determined already, or that is yet to be determined?
There is information relative to that that is publicly available, can be found on the school website, and will be shared out, I'm sure, by other groups.
All right, because I would think that would be an important part if I was voting, which I will be voting, to know if I vote against a 20-year contract. I want to know which other schools have agreed to take the students.
So, yeah, and
Please.
if I might just weigh in, and again, I don't know, I've never seen your contract. I don't know all the details of your contract. So I'm weighing in here a little bit, without specifics. But two aspects that I thought might be important is, in the state of New Hampshire, we are experiencing a declining number of students. So since 2020, so the last 20 years, we've lost 46,000 students. We're forecast to lose another 28% by 2035. And it's really driven by demographics. Like I did my part, you did your part, but these young people, they're just not getting it done. Haven't had enough kids, right? Apparently. And so my sense is, as I look across the state, and I haven't looked at your immediate neighboring towns, but many schools in New Hampshire are going to find themselves with additional space, which is probably something that would cause us to want to be really thinking about having a much more flexible and dynamic system so that student bodies are able to move where they want to, so that then we can adjust appropriately.
Yes, absolutely. But I think that's also why it's important for us to know which other schools have agreed to take our kids.
Yeah, we
don't
understand,
sign the
and
contract.
that's a community question we will certainly discuss.
Yeah, I had to say a couple of things.
Yeah, please, Professor Sala would like to weigh in.
Yeah, so I'm not going to talk specifically. I don't know much about what you're about to vote on with your schools, but I'll just say a couple of things. One of the nice things about the New Hampshire system is towns get to decide. You don't have to take the first model of contract that you get in front of you and say it's this way or bust. And I'll just throw some other ones out there, for example. So before I moved to Hopkinton, I lived in another town, and one of the things I was interested in doing there was we had a school. I'm going to try to avoid using the names of the schools, but we had a school that most everybody went to. But there were a growing number of folks in the town who wanted to go to a different school. It was an equal distance away. It just happened to be down the other side of the mountain. And so one of the things we asked was, hey, I know we have this contract with school number 1. And we're paying some set amount, and we don't want to come asking for tax increases. And so we said, if somebody wants to go to school number 2, why don't we just give them the money that we were going to give to school number 1? And if there's a difference in pay, they feel like it's important to them, they can make that up, or they could go to school number 1 and get an adequate education there. I'm always kind of, I just want to say, I have to say this is not legal advice. But I'm always kind of weary, especially I'll just tell you from the state board perspective, of long contracts, because they're long. And it feels weird to enter into a long contract where you have to stay in that contract no matter what the other party does. And you're locked in there no matter what the curriculum becomes, no matter what they're teaching. And there you are. You're stuck in that contract. And I'll tell you, I want to try to avoid using names, but you can go to state board minutes and look it up. And we have towns that come that are locked into these long cooperative school district deals, and they want out, and there's no way out. They're trapped. There's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing the state board can do about it. I'm not saying every long-term contract is a bad contract. If you could lock Tom Brady up, I just want to get that in there. You should probably lock him up for a long time. But you want to think about those things before you do it. And the last thing I'll say about it is when you go into long-term contracts, you give up your leverage. When you go into that contract, part of your leverage, and I'll just say in the example, this is again, one of the arguments I made when I was trying to work this out in my town. It gives us lots of leverage to make, especially we were one of the smaller towns of the several towns that were part of that school district. But if our students weren't happy, even though we were a smaller town, I wanted the opportunity for parents to say, we're going to take our students and go somewhere else. And especially when you have declining enrollment, that puts parents in the driver's seat. When you leave yourself the opportunity to make those kinds of decisions down the road. But when you lock yourself into 20 years, those decisions become much, much more difficult.
If I
Thank
could
you.
just mention, I know a situation north of me where a small town signed an area agreement 17 years ago with a larger school district, a 20-year agreement that they had no options until year 17. And they are now at that point in a similar position that you are in. But their initial contract evidently had a certain number of students guaranteed to go to the larger district. Their student population declined greatly. So they're paying over $30,000 per student to this larger district now, and looking at what their options are the same way you are, and being pressured to sign another 20-year agreement with that same larger school district. So you're not in a unique position, but I believe there are options. And with declining enrollment and space being available in many of these school districts, they're going to be looking for students to come and bring state dollars with them also. So I think to a degree, you're in a good position where you are right now.
So I'm going to weigh in a little bit just relative to the story that Richard Sala was saying. And it's playing off of some of the comments that I made in the very beginning when I was talking about the schools themselves can become creative, right? So our public schools can be responsive to those families. So whatever you do as a community, I hope that you're thinking about, okay, so how can we craft a system that meets the needs of the families? Because what we don't want to do is to create a circumstance where families are forced to choose the system that they're being offered, the public system that's being offered, or they leave the system altogether and choose something else. What we really want to do is we can meet the needs of those families in the system. We've got great leadership in the schools. What we have to do is we have to enable and equip those public schools to be able to meet the needs of the families in their community and not hamstring them and say like, well, you only can offer one option.
Yeah, just one last thing about that is, it was Bernie, is that right? Is that who was asking the
Yes.
question earlier? I just want to reiterate, it is true that at any point, a parent in New Hampshire could wake up and say, I'm going to take my kid to private school or I'm going to homeschool, but they're not going to get the benefit of the taxes that they pay to take their child to that new place. They'd have to do it entirely on their own. So if you're, I don't know, if you're a single mother, and you recognize that your child is just not performing in the current school that they're in to the best of their ability, and you feel like there's some other school you could take them to, you have to figure out how you're going to do that completely on your own. But if you make that decision that, hey, we're going to let that money, even though it's equal to, whatever school you benchmark to, but we're going to let you take that money and give your kid the best opportunity. It's not like extra money. It's not like we paid out more. If they stay in that school, you're getting less on your return. I mean, you're contributing the same exact amount of money for a student who's underperforming, who might do better elsewhere, which is a better return on your investment, I think. So.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Please.
Stacy Marchione, I'm a 10-year resident of Deerfield. Could you speak, please, to the issue of top-off agreements in New Hampshire? There's been a lot of discussion of that in town as to whether that is legal, illegal, ill-advised, inequitable. It's been suggested, I think, by our town attorney that top-off agreement whereby, say we contract with one high school and their tuition is $15,000, and we want to send our kid to a school that's 20,000. Can we take that 15 with us and pay the difference out of pocket as a parent, that extra 5,000? Our town attorney thought that perhaps would be viewed as inequitable and subject the town to a lawsuit. So is that, how are you seeing that in New Hampshire? Are you seeing top-off agreements work? Is there anything that you see in law that would put the town in a position of jeopardy as to that type of agreement?
Just real quick before we go into that, just to be clear, it was the school district attorney that expressed those opinions, who is separate and different than the town's attorney, right? So the town of Deerfield is a legal entity. The Deerfield School District is a legal entity. Those are two separate legal entities that have different lawyers. So it's not the town attorney that was reportedly giving that advice. It was the school district attorney that was giving that advice. I'll turn it over to whoever would like to answer the question.
I'll just say a couple of brief things about it, and I'm sure other people will say things. I'll say this. I had this exact same conversation when I was talking about it in the town where I lived. And here's the question I kept asking: show me the law that says it's not legal to have an agreement where everyone can go to school one and get an adequate education for this amount. But if you don't want to, we'll give you the same amount of money that we would give you to go to school one. You could take it elsewhere. And that term top off means, so if school one costs, $15,000 a student, you could take that $15,000 that we would have paid for you to go there, go here. And if theirs is $17,000, you have to pay the extra $2,000. And I have not had anyone yet show me in the law where this is illegal. The argument is always something to the effect of, you're going to subject yourself to a lawsuit. Every time I walk out of my door and get into my car, I subject myself to a lawsuit.
Is that legal advice?
That's not legal. That's
But I'll say this. I'm not aware of any law that makes it illegal. If it turns out it goes to a lawsuit and somehow you go to court and the court tells you were wrong, it's not a criminal law. It was a decision you made in good faith. There was no law in the books that told you it was wrong. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. But I'll tell you this, when it comes to my kids, unless you can show me in black and white that this is wrong, and I think it's better for my kids, I'll see you in court. I don't understand the idea.
just one second. So, just like we do at deliberative session, we're not going to show motion from the audience. So no clapping, booing, hissing, etc. I totally get it. I'm sympathetic to it, but just to keep things moving along and to keep it, the temperature down in the room, let's just stay copacetic, please. Thank you.
The last comment I'll make is just about the idea of, so we talk a lot about adequate education in New Hampshire. That's the term that we commonly hear. It's the term that we see in the newspaper. I just want to talk for 1 second about this idea of equity. I don't understand how, so if you're student one, you can go to the school that you're being told to go to, and you could be doing well, and you are paying some set amount of dollars. And if you're student two and you're failing, but you're going to the school we told you to and paying some amount of dollars, how is that equitable? In one case, we're both paying the same amount, but I'm not getting the same on my return. That's not equity. Equity would be, let's get this person to a place where they'll be successful for the exact same amount of money. So both people are coming out with an education that benefits them well and benefits them in their future. Sorry.
And so I don't have a ton to add to that, but I will say that we do. So I don't know, I'm unaware of any law that prohibits top-off agreements as they were described here. And we do have top-off agreements in New Hampshire. There are other districts that are using top-off agreements in their town tuitioning programs. So that's available. And then the final thing that I will just comment on in terms of the equity, you would, I mean, I hear often from parents and families of kids who are struggling in school, and they will do anything for their children, right? And so to communicate to a parent whose child is not succeeding, not doing well in a particular educational setting, that you have to stay there. And the parents saying, like, I want my child, I will make the sacrifice to allow my child to go to this other place, and saying that's not available to you because we don't allow top-off agreements, that may be inequitable itself.
And if I could just add to the top-off agreement discussion, I agree. I don't know of anything in statute that prevents that, but we actually have legislation pending in the House right now that would specifically allow it. House Bill 275 says to enroll a child in a tuition school approved by the local school board whose tuition cost is above the district's established tuition cost per pupil as determined by the local board may require the parent to pay the difference in cost to that other school. So I think that we don't know what's going to happen with that. We haven't even had the hearing on that bill yet. So that won't be determined probably until June. But that legislation is pending that puts it in statute that, yes, you can do that.
And so keep in mind as well, like, so in all these top-off agreements, the families all have a no-cost option to a FAPE, a free and appropriate public education. But if that's not working for them, you're just giving them the options. And again, I come back to this theme of, you know, we need our public schools. Again, as I see this national tsunami relative to choice, like, let's not hamstring our public schools. Let's let them provide choices and options to their families so that they can better serve that constituency.
And if I could just add to that, there's a number of ways those local schools can do that. They can even start a charter school within the public school for a subset of students who maybe need some special attention or learn differently. So there are a lot of options open to your public school also.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, the table is empty. We are here to answer your questions, any and all. We have well over an hour left, so please don't be shy.
Hi, I'm Ellen O'Donnell from Deerfield. You actually started to answer my question. It was going to come up. And it was about where you were talking about meeting the needs of the families in your school and offering other things. And you did mention about the charter school. I was wondering if you could just kind of expound on that and give us some other ideas or things that other schools have done in the state.
So in terms of offering options to other students, is that what your question is? Yeah. So, I mean, what we find is that a lot of the choice at this point in time is very narrowly constricted in terms of the classroom. For example, we use a program called Universal Design for Learning, which is trying to, in the specific instructional, give those choices and options to the families. But what we do is we have very few options at kind of a macro level, right? So we're trying to drive it down into the system, but we need it to come back up and go across the system. So that the children have and the families have different options. And I'll give you another example of where this manifests itself. So I don't know if I have a lot of good examples in response to your question, but I thank you for that in terms of charter schools. But we have another phenomena that's taking place in the state of New Hampshire, and that is relative to our adult education programs. So we run adult education programs across the country, across the state. And there's a woman who runs that, Sarah Wheeler, and I often refer to her as the principal of the largest high school in New Hampshire. And that's because she has 1,600 11 and 12th graders who the high school that is assigned to those students is just not working for them. So those students working with their families are finding their ways to that. And sometimes they're working with their schools to try and find their ways to these alternative pathways. So that would be an example of an alternative pathway. In our schools, we have career and technical education programs. These are excellent programs for any student, right? And so students have the option to choose those. Unfortunately, we often have sometimes some barriers to accessing some of that programming. So not all of the students are able to take advantage of those. You mentioned charter schools. Charter schools are public schools here in New Hampshire. And one of the things that's unique about charter schools in New Hampshire that is not necessarily universal across the country, and everybody doesn't understand it. So first of all of our charter schools are public schools, and they're all nonprofits. We have no for-profit charter schools in New Hampshire. The second is that all of the charters that we have in the state of New Hampshire are chartered by the State Board of Education. And one of the things that the state board, that Rich and his other board members do, and I often get to see them do, is when a charter school comes to the state board, they don't just say like, well, I'm going to open up another school just like the community school, the neighborhood school, because these guys would tell them, no, like do something different. We already have one of those. We're looking for an option. We're looking for other things. And so all of our charter schools have very unique missions that are designed to try and meet the needs of a unique cohort or group of students. Most of our charters are successful, but you know what? Sometimes the charters don't make it. And that's okay, because that means that they were not meeting a need. And so they're going to go away and somebody else will open up a charter school that maybe does meet a need. But again, that same degree of flexibility exists within our public school system. And we want them to more and more be able to embrace that idea of bringing different options and choice into the community. I mean, imagine, and again, I don't know all of I'm not as familiar with, I live in Wilton, so I don't know all your communities around here, but I mean, you can imagine that, just even among your communities, like, okay, so this community is going to have a very STEM focused, public school. And over here we have an arts focused public school. And over here we have a classical education public school that's got that focus. And these are some of the things that the charter community is doing. And as they're doing that, students are saying, I'm very interested in the classics, or I'm very interested in art, I'm very interested in STEM. And so the students are going to those charter schools, but those same kinds of identities can be built into our traditional public schools as well.
I think with those charter schools and really the other private schools, et cetera, they have the best form of accountability in that parents can walk. If their kids are not getting the education that they need, they can walk to a different school setting, which is not always the case in your local public school.
Could be.
And I guess how that manifests itself is that, like, so if I look at my charters, I mean, again, some charters in the state, there was a charter that, like, I think it was last year that wrapped up, right? I think it was a very much a project-based thing, and it was in a community that the schools, the parents didn't want that. So they said, well, we should just wind up. They wrapped up operations and they moved on. I think at the time they had 35 children that we then got placed into other educational settings. But then many of those charters have waiting lists, right? Because the parents are saying like, if only there were more seats, I would love to send my child to that. But that's what we really want to see. We want to see like every school have a waiting list, not just a zip code list necessarily. Right.
Did you want to expound on the not necessarily, or?
Oh, I mean, this issue for me is always really just about your neighbors. I mean, I just want to say that it really is like, think about your neighbors and think about any time you've been sitting around having coffee and they're telling you, my kid's really struggling. I wish I had a school that did X, right? And all we're saying is, let's give our neighbors the opportunity to take their children to the schools that best fit their unique learning style. And it's, I mean, I guess to me, it's just a no-brainer to me. If my neighbor could do better with, take the money I was going to pay anyway, go somewhere and do better. Or even have the chance to do better, right? Because we don't have equal, we can't guarantee equal outcomes, not the way the world works. But we can give you the opportunity. And so, yeah.
Thank you very much. Question, please.
Kimberly Black, a lifelong resident of Deerfield. I've got 2 small children that are far away from our upcoming high school contract, but my question's kind of going to target that. And I think most of the people in this room, based on the language that is being presented in a petition warrant article about what an approved school is. Our language is specific for tuition contracts to high schools, but if there's a definition of an approved school, I would appreciate it.
So I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I'll go to, I just want to say though, 20-year contract, your children are not far away from that, right? 20-year contract means your kids would definitely go to the school that they would tell you to go to. Right. So you can go to the education rules for approved schools. Let me pull it up. 30628. 30628. That's 2. There it is. Okay, so I'll just kind of run through it real quick. So it's Ed Rule 30628, the approval process pursuant to, this is really going to bore you. I'm sorry. Pursuant to RSA 186.8.1 and RSA 21N65, the department shall administer Education Rule 306. The following school approval categories shall apply to the administration of Ed 306. 1, approved for a 5-year period, provided that a school meets and continues to meet all requirements of Ed 306. It can be conditionally approved or it can be unapproved. So those are the 3 options when someone comes to get an approval. They can either be approved, they can be conditionally approved, they can be unapproved. And then all it is a list of things in the RSA that they have to follow to be an approved school. Let me just see if there's anything else in here. I'll pull up the RSA if you just want to say.
Okay. And I'll just add to that. So he's referring to the Ed 306 rules, which is basically the approval process for public schools. Those come to the State Board of Education and that they receive approval through the State Board of Education. They have, a fairly rigorous process. Then we also have 318, which are the rules for approval of a public charter school. And then we have the Ed 400 rules, which are rules for the approval of a non-public school. And non-public school approval includes programmatic approval or approval for attendance. So there's 2 different types of approval that you can have for those. So those are the categories of approved schools. Does that help? Is that okay?
And those approved non-public schools can be religious or not. Both are available as options.
I'm just going to weigh in on that really quickly, just so people understand it. So one of the things, there's been some Supreme Court cases over the last 5 years that have basically made clear that you can't, if you offer, so choice programs are available to both secular and non-secular schools. There are some Supreme Court cases, most like Trinity Lutheran and Esposito in Montana, and then one in our neighboring state over in Maine, Carson v. Macon, that basically, because Maine has a tuitioning program and they were trying to exclude parochial schools, and they said, you can't do that.
So I'm just going to try to state that a little differently. And anybody that can say I'm wrong, please correct me. Basically, what the Supreme Court of the United States is ruled is that you can't discriminate against a religious school, right? You can't say, yeah, you can go to any school except for religious schools. We don't allow that. That's discriminatory practice against a religious school, and that's not allowed. That
was primarily Carson Macon. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nancy Shute from Deerfield and a retired public school teacher for 38 years. Some of what's I'm still having questions about is maybe it's Deerfield's definition of choice, and our focus right now is on high school choice. Deerfield used to have choice. When I first moved to Deerfield, there was probably more choice. People had Pembroke, Central, Co-Brown. I don't remember a child ever having to apply or being turned down from their school. When my son was in 8th grade, he had to apply. He had choice of where to apply for public high school. He applied to Co-Brown. He had the choice to become a member of a lottery at Concord High, because they were just starting to take some of our kids. There were students that, although they had, I guess I should call them more options than choice, there was no guarantee they were going to get into a school. And there were students that didn't have a high school when they stood up and graduated from 8th grade in Deerfield. They did not know where they were going to high school because those options or choices didn't work for them. And I guess for me, and hopefully you can answer it, I'm wondering how you guarantee a child will leave here in 8th grade and have a high school placement with equality. It doesn't matter if they're a athlete or a a tech geek, they're a straight A student, they're a struggling student, they're a special ed student. Am very concerned about it being equal for all students. And how do we know that kids will have a placement? Because in Deerfield, under what people are saying was choice when they graduated from 8th grade, technically wasn't choice. It was up to getting lucky in the lottery at Concord. And it was Co-Brown accepting you. And I know Pembroke took some of the kids, and be honest, I don't remember how Pembroke decided which kids. My biggest concern is that choice is truly, I want to go to school A, I get to go to school A. I want to go to school B, I get to go to school B, no matter what I'm at. And even with the top off, I'm not sure that that's totally equal, because I might be able to get my X amount of dollars from Deerfield to put towards that school, but maybe I can't even afford the 2,000 extra dollars. So to me, I want it all to be equal for every child that goes through our district. So I guess and believe me, being a school teacher, I wanted what was best for every child in my classroom. And some of them are here that I had as students. So I don't know, maybe I didn't do you well. I don't know. But anyway, I certainly want to put children first, but I want it equal for all students. And that's what worries me with high school choice, which I think is more our Deerfield issue right now. Maybe eventually it will go to other choice, but right now our focus is high school choice.
So first of all, thank you for your service. Can we all you're real 38 years, right? Thank you for that. And I would say in terms of the equality, what we have to also consider is, if you have, Rich used an example earlier of student 1 and student 2. Student 1 was doing fine in that environment. Student 2 was getting wiped out in that environment. Is that equal if one student's able to access the education and it isn't? So when we think about that, simply because they have the entry ability doesn't necessarily mean that you have equality. In terms of, where the students are going to go, really a lot of that rests on your school board to determine and make agreements with area schools, right? There's under 193.3, there is a tuition approval program. So it's RSA 193.3, and it's a tuitioning program, and your district would make arrangements with neighborhood schools or, area schools that they want those students to go to. But there may not be a guarantee that suppose that you have that agreement, then every single kid wants to go to the same school and that school can't do it. That happens every day in New Hampshire in my public charter schools, where they have to do a lottery in order to be admitted in there. And maybe on the second lottery, they're able to get into that school. But simply because you can't guarantee them entry into every single school doesn't mean that we say that then we're not going to have any choices for anybody. So what you have to do is, again, I would hope that your school board is going to work with the community, figure out where these students are going to want to go. I don't know what you guys are contemplating. You could have an open tuition program where the funding is provided and the parents get to make the choice. So they're navigating and figuring out where they want that individual child to be able to go to school. But that would be, the implementation is really going to be something that would happen. The only thing I would finally point to is, again, we've got declining enrollments in the state. So we are seeing, a reduced number of students in our school facilities. So the likelihood, I don't know when your kid was graduating from 8th grade and heading on to that next step, but it could have been at a period of time where there was a peak. But I can guarantee you now, looking at the demographics, that you're going to see a declining number of students across the state of New Hampshire.
I just want to, what was your name again? I'm sorry. Nancy. Thank you. I like to call people by their names, but I've had a lot of bombs go off in my ears, so I can't always hear the first time you say the names. This is, again, this goes back to what we said earlier about one of the beauties of the New Hampshire system is your town is going to get to decide. And so let me just give you like one alternate scenario where you go to school, whatever. I don't want to use the schools in your particular situation, so I'm just going to use, I like to keep using 1 and 2, but you go to school 1 and you say, we want you to guarantee that we could send all our students there, right? And but we just want to let you know, like we're gonna send any of our students who want to come at the tuition, agreement that we agree on. but we're going to give our people the opportunity to go somewhere else if this isn't the best fit for their kid. And then just find the school that will agree to it. Right. And I just want to give you, I just want to say that's not impossible or even weird. It happens in the town that I lived in before the town I lived in now. We just had average daily membership. We were not required to send a particular number of students there. We just paid for the students that we sent, and the school agreed to that. So you can, that's just one example. You could set this thing up in a lot of ways, but I think what you want to do is set it up in a way that provides you with a lot of flexibility so that you can ensure that everybody, is at least has the opportunity to make an adjustment if they need to. It's also true that, there's, we can reach capacity problems, right? But under that scenario, if you wanted to go to school number 2, and they just didn't have the capacity, it's not like you wouldn't have a school to go to. You'd have the school that you agreed with in the beginning where, we're going to send our students here. So, I think some of it is about negotiating the contract you want and not just taking the one that you're given.
I think that there's a small school district over in the western part of the state, and they actually have a school fair, like a college fair. And local schools come in, set up a table, parents go around, talk to the various representatives from the school, and the parent will decide, this school sounds good for my student. They'll go back to the school board, and the school board will try and work out a tuitioning agreement with those schools that the parents have selected, which I think is a fantastic model, just like the college fair that I remember years and years ago.
Anyone else? Great, thank you. Next question. Great, thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name's Kendra Cohen. Thank you for taking my question. So if the high school contract that we currently have pending on the ballot is not approved by the voters, it's very possible that a school choice model would cost taxpayers in town a lot more money. I don't think that there is a school around who would match the rate that we're getting from Concord in the contract. And in Deerfield, I don't know if you've been here before, but there's not a huge commercial tax base. So a lot of the increased tuition costs falls onto our taxpayer shoulders. So I know there has been a lot of legislation in Concord this year about school stuff. I've been trying to pay attention to it. I know there was one about increasing state adequacy aid. So if we got more money from the state for our schools, that would really offset the amount of money that our taxpayers would have to pay for a school choice model. And I'm just wondering about your thoughts about increasing state aid to our schools to support a school choice option.
We have legislation every year about the school funding formula. It's changed 2008, 2012, and a number of times since then with different additions to try and make up for disparity in the amount of state funding to schools with that are maybe property-rich towns versus those that aren't. So it's an ongoing battle. We have several more this year. What's going to be passed? What's going to happen? I don't have a crystal ball, unfortunately. I don't know.
Support it?
Beg pardon?
But do you support increasing it?
Different aspects of it. But would it be across the board? I'm not sure if that will happen, but certainly I think there's a feeling that we want to do something for the less property-rich towns that can raise the funds to make more pupil dollars available for their schools. I'm not sure what's going to happen. We're negotiating over the next few days about several of the bills.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in. I'm not a panelist, but I am a state rep. And I'll weigh in on my 2 cents because these two gentlemen have no control really about what the legislature chooses to do. The biggest challenge with relying on the state for anything is what I love to call broken promises. And when people say the state broke their promise, the legislature chooses to do something in a particular session. More money for education, less money for education, more money for mental health, less money for mental health. It's a 2-year budget. So when we talk about how we're going to fund education, and it's a legislative cycle, it's a 2-year cycle. So every 2 years, it can be completely reinvented. And the decisions that were made by previous legislatures really have no impact on the future legislative decision making. And so you can have this sort of seesaw up and down, and that's the challenge with relying on state funding. What's interesting is the premise that school choice costs more money, because a lot of what I'm hearing is that if you use a top-off agreement, you're actually sort of fixing the dollar value quite finitely, as I'm understanding the way it's being explained to me. And I know you're going to ask me, do I support it? Depends what it is, right? So that legislation and the budget, it really depends on what that formula is, and how that money is gotten, and how it's divvied up, and for what. And without knowing those specific details that we won't have for a couple of months, because typically the budget doesn't get finished up to rather late in the season. We won't have good answers for that yet. We're still waiting for the governor's budget to be presented to the House. That's going to happen shortly, and then the House will begin its work, and the Senate likewise. And it's 400 state reps, it's 24 state senators, and it's a governor that all have to work together to iron that out. So it's difficult.
The governor's budget will be presented on February 14th.
Yeah.
And he has indicated he will have a proposal in regards to the school funding formula as part of his budget proposal. So we're waiting to see what he is suggesting.
I just want to add to school choice does not have to cost more for exactly that reason, right? So again, if you enter into a top off, if you have a situation where you're going to school one and it's some set amount, and someone else wants to go somewhere else and it's more, and they have to make up the difference, then your taxes then it hasn't changed. The cost is the exact same amount.
And can I ask how many school districts in New Hampshire have top-off agreements?
I don't know the number.
I know of 2 off the top of my head, but we can go back and take a look at that if that's
So there have
interesting.
been no lawsuits from those 2 districts?
No, but they've been in place for many years.
Just
Can I just want to weigh on one thing, and just the only thing I want you to keep in mind, and a little bit as you were describing in terms of the cost, so don't make an assumption that it costs more. Remember, you're in a buyer's market right now, right? And, with fewer students, the opportunity to go to these other school systems and say, okay, what are you willing to do for me? And as, Rich has pointed out, you're not risking additional funding because you've already committed to a certain fixed amount. You say okay, families, if you want to take that fixed amount and use it someplace else, that's okay. So it doesn't, I'm having a little bit difficulty understanding kind of that additive or the increased cost.
Well, the fixed amount has to be based on a tuition at one school, right? So we can't just say, here's $15,000, figure it out. We have to say, this is the tuition that
We'll
you
get you
can
into this
pay
school.
to go to Concord. But if we don't have a long-term contract and there's volatility in state funding from the state, the amount that the taxpayers have to pay is going to vary a lot every year, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think the best way to, so that I have this saying, there's things that I would like to be true, but I have to live in the world that I live in. So what I would say is fight for the very best tuition agreement you can get now. And if in the future there's an increase in funding, you'll be that much better off.
Okay, so we'll just have to make it work in the meantime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question, please.
Ed Cross. So we have, my wife and I, we have 7 children. So we have but homeschooled or private schooled our children, all but one child for 3 years. So we do pay tuition. We have 3 high schoolers right now. So we are paying our taxes and paying our tuitions. It'll be nice to see if the state does somehow secure a bill that will let the money follow. And when I say let the money follow, that if we do have school choice, can that money follow that student to whatever school the parents choose to put him in, him or her? I do believe parents have the rights to choose that. I think that that sometimes has been taken away from us. And I hope that as a town, we look at those options seriously so that the parents can have more value in choosing what's right for their kids. Now, with that being said, enrollments are dropping. There's lots of data to back that up. The schools are going to get hungrier and hungrier for tuition because they're losing children. The numbers are shrinking and their costs are fixed. A 20-year deal is ridiculous because so much can change in 20 years. And the schools that are now looking for students is increasing. The numbers that they can take on is increasing. It will only get better as long as we learn how to negotiate.
Mr. Cross.
And negotiation on short terms.
Mr. Cross.
Yes.
It's a question and answer. So I'm assuming that you're rapidly getting to a question.
I'm going to get to the question of.
Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside for somebody that has a question, please.
So is there any guidelines that that you can provide that would explain the rationality of long-term contracts for schools right now? Is there any numbers that would support that would make good financial decision-making? That's my question.
Thank you. I think that I'm not going to answer that question directly. Let me just start with that. But I'm going to say this. Those are town questions, and I'm not a member of your town. And so I think there are better questions to be had in the community. What do we value? Why do we think 20 years is or isn't a good benchmark? What is it about the future of enrollment that we want to take into consideration? Yeah, I think that's the most I'm going to say. I mean, those are the kinds of things that you want to be thinking about when you make that decision.
How you doing today?
Sorry, Zach, just one quick thing. So Mr. Cross was the first one to violate the rule, but I happen to know on good authority that he is in fact a Deerfield resident. He didn't mention that, but he is a Deerfield resident. Thank you, Zach.
Hi. So my name is Zach Langlois. I'm a lifelong resident of Deerfield. I'm also the chairman of the school board here in town. I've listened to what you folks have said, and there's some interesting statements that you've made to us. So, you know, there's been discussions in our community about top-off agreements, and you have said quite clearly that there is no legislation that doesn't allow top-off agreements. When boards make decisions, they consult with their legal counsel. Our legal counsel has advised us that top-off agreements are not right and that they created an inequitable situation. So does the Department of Education and the legislature typically recommend to boards that they defy legal counsel? And then another question I have for you is, although there isn't legislation that specifically says it's not legal, you did mention that you're looking at enabling legislation at the moment. So why the enabling legislation if there's nothing illegal about it? Or a risk of it being
right.
illegal?
As you've said, some people think it's fine to have top-off agreements. Some legal people have said it's not. The prime sponsor of the bill lives in an area where he has heard both sides of that argument and wanted to make it clear that it is legal. So he authored this legislation and put it forward to make sure that there was no doubt that this can be done.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say a couple of things about legal counsel. It's counsel. I've been legal counsel for many different entities and people. Staff judge. I worked in the staff judge advocate office. I was counsel to the commander of Marine Rotational Force Darwin. I worked in the staff judge advocate office of the commanding general of 1st Marine Division. And I wasn't going to use you as an example, but I've also been counsel to the commissioner. And I have on more than one occasion given counsel, and been told that's not the way we're going to go because it's not illegal. And so we have conversations about, I'm just telling you how I operate. So we look at pros and cons. And so I'm not telling you, I never have gone to anyone and said, defy legal counsel. Actually wanted to several times. But what I can say is it's worth the conversation of, show me why. And I think the most important thing, and I guess the last thing I'll say about this is to remember that your council wasn't elected. Your council wasn't elected. That's your power. They're just there to help you wield it. And sometimes you're going to agree with them and sometimes you're not. And I said this earlier and I'll say it again, but I actually was on a select board and we had the same conversation and I just said I was willing to do it. I'm just willing to do it. Nobody could tell me why it's illegal. Nobody can show me a piece of legislation. I do want to add, just because you have legislation coming out to put something on the books does not mean that it's illegal. There are lots of laws that get put on the books, even though there's nothing that says it's illegal already because people want it on the books. So the fact that you have legislation coming doesn't mean that, oh, we're putting this legislation in just because it's not legal now. Right. If that was the case, you would have to repeal something. You'd have to get rid of some other law. There's no repeal here. We're just adding on. So I think I'm not going to say to you, defy counsel, but I'm saying if you're interested in this idea, you should press your counsel. That's what I'm saying.
So a couple of follow-up questions. So
Can I just respond one really quick? Let me just hit that because I respect your counsel and whatever advice you're giving you, but you indicate that your counsel believes it's inequitable. And I think really your counsel is there to give you legal advice. Kind of going to Nancy's comment a little bit earlier, right? So what is equity if we're locking students into a learning instructional environment that's not going to work for them? Is that equitable? Right? There's the equity, there's a lot of taxpayers who are represented here. What is equitable to them as well? So I would, like my only, comment would be to make sure we watch, they're there for the law, right? As opposed to kind of the policy decision. That's really what you're elected to reflect the policy decisions.
So you had mentioned you're not familiar with the contract that Deerfield has currently presented or currently with Concord, or the pending contract with Concord. So that's going to be on the ballot in March. It is a continuation. We keep hearing 20 years. It's a 20-year contract, but it's a 12-year lock basically. And then the ability to continue based on the discretion of whatever board is in place at that time. We have another warrant article that was petitioned on that would include Deerfield paying the full cost of tuition. That was a petition article placed on by residents of the community. So we really are, I know there's been discussion about it not involving necessarily cost, but if the contract fails and we are looking at a passage of that warrant article specifically states that the town picks up the full tally of tuition. The economy that we get in our contract with Concord really puts us in a very strong position there. The most commonly heard alternative to Concord High School would cost the taxpayers significantly more. So when you were asked about funding, I think that's one of the questions that comes up is, we're having a discussion and I appreciate you guys coming out here, but the particulars to this situation, to our warrants, to our community, there is a financial impact to this. And our community did say 2 years ago, they like the idea of school choice. That was on the ballot. We had about 1,100 responses, which is in this town a very good response rate for a question asked that way. We asked a follow-up question, which was, do you support school choice at an additional cost? And the response was basically flipped. So there is a cost impact in this particular circumstance because of the circumstances that we're looking at. So I want to make it clear, and I hope that you guys can, as you look at, this discussion as it pertains to Deerfield, because you're obviously here talking to us tonight, is how do you help our residents reconcile that? Because we know there's a cost equation. We know the formulas for Concord. We know what the tuitions are in the area of schools. So I just want to make sure that we're being, transparent. And when we look at that stuff, we are weighing, really, it's a cost. And that is a big part of the equation. And I hope you guys can at least, be aware of that as we're having these discussions.
Thank you for the question. The one thing I just want to let you guys know, so we are an SB2 town. And so a citizen petition warrant article will be on our warrant. Our school deliberative session will be this Saturday. So we actually don't know the final form of what that question will be. That question is amendable at the deliberative session. And so, well, right now it says to pay the full tuition. There's no guarantee it'll actually come out of the deliberative session that way. So it's a little hard to predict what'll actually be on the ballot. I just want to make sure you guys understood that's our town structure and where we're at. And with that, I'll yield so you can answer the question. Thank you.
I just want to say, I mean, first of all, I appreciate the hard work and deliberation that goes into these, right? So one of the reasons we were asked to come out tonight was to talk about options that are available in New Hampshire. So I've been throwing out as many options as passed through my mind, any particular time. When you sit down as a community and have to look at all the variables and make the final hard decisions about, where we're going to go, what we're going to pay, how much flexibility. I mean, those are decisions that you get to make with your town. So I'm not here to fight against your current option. I'm just saying, have we asked, right? Have we asked, we want to do this tuition, but we don't want to be locked in for 12 years and 90% of our students, or sometimes, and I'm just telling you from my own experience, we feel pressure because schools are strong. Right. They come from a strong position. And I'm not saying this happened here. I'm just saying, I've done this before. I've gone to talk to other communities about this kind of stuff. And one of the things I tell them is there's a feeling when you go into these negotiations that you need something and they can give it to you, but they need something too. You can't teach empty seats. And so I'm just saying, consider all your options. I definitely respect and agree with that. And not to forget that you have leverage, and when you're thinking about the way you want to organize yourself, don't forget that. But I'm not saying that you haven't thought. I mean, I'm 100% sure that you've talked. That you said the school board, right? So
Yes.
So I'm 100% sure that you're talking about. I mean, I go to the budget meetings at my school. I'm 100% sure you're talking about this, wrestling with it. It's no knock on that process at all.
Anyone else? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zach.
Rebecca Hutchinson. I'm a citizen, I think about 48 years here in town. So my questions are for the Commissioner of Education, Mr. Edelblut, and I appreciate you coming out to Deerfield. And my questions are related to the education freedom accounts. Am I correct that they've been in place for 2 years, or is it 3 now, or?
2 years.
Okay. And how much did you project that they were going to cost in the first year?
So we thought that they would cost $128,000,
And how much did we spend in the first year?
about $3 million.
Okay. And how about the second year? How much did you project for the second year?
So what I would tell you is that the projections out of 128,000 was because this is a new program. So my background is as an accountant. I understand numbers and financial forecasts quite well. And because we had no experience with these types of choice programs in New Hampshire, we went to Arizona, which had a program that was the most similar to the New Hampshire program. And we saw their participation rates. And so rather than try and make an estimate, we used their actual experience of the numbers of students who actually participated in the program to drive that forecast. And what we found was that there was vastly more families that wanted to participate in the education freedom accounts than was anticipated when the legislature passed that bill.
Right.
That
So
is
how
why
much,
you see
and so how much?
1,000 students participating at $14 million is going to be the cost of that program.
So,
And so what I will tell you
understood-
is, well, let me just finish one more
Sure.
thing, and then as many questions as you want. And then the one thing that I will tell you is in the education freedom account, the average cost to a taxpayer is about $5,000 per student. $5,000 per
Okay,
student.
you're answering a lot more
average-
questions than I'm asking,
That's
so I'm
okay,
just
but
wondering
it's
if I
just
might.
good context. The average cost to the taxpayer of a student in a traditional public school is $20,000. So when an individual makes an assertion that this program is costing taxpayers money, in fact, it's reducing the cost to taxpayers by $15,000 a student, money which is then available to the local public schools to use for those students who stay in the school so that they have more money for fewer students, which is what we're really after. And I guess that would
Could I
probably be
just-
I'm trying to answer your question.
You're doing a lot more than that. I asked a really simple question, and
I
I
think I've-
appreciate you wanting to give the full picture. But I actually am kind of going somewhere with this, and not just about the money. Because so what I understood was the first year you projected 100 and something thousand, and it was again 3.3 million, you said, I think.
I said about 3 million.
Okay. And the second year, how much did you project?
We didn't make a projection on the second year. We took the first year's projections.
So you only expected another 100 and some thousand the second year?
No, I don't recall what in the first year I made a forecast, but
For
I don't know what
year.
the second year forecast was. But what
Okay.
we have seen is more students have taken advantage of the education freedom accounts than was anticipated.
So what I'm really curious about.
Yes. What is the question?
Clearly, yeah, is the projection, sort of where are we going with this? Is your hope or your intention or trajectory that we will spend increasingly more and more money on these options, these school choice, these education freedom accounts, and less in the public schools? What's your goal? What would you like to see the balance between money spent on public schools versus education freedom accounts, if you could have it the way you think it would be best for the children in New Hampshire?
So if I had it the way that I feel is best for children in New Hampshire, each child would have an option for an educational setting that is right for that child. And if that means that there would be further expansion of the education freedom accounts and would save taxpayers $15,000 per student that participates and allow that additional funding to be used in the public schools, that would be wonderful. But what I can tell you as well is that today, all of our public schools receive all of the funding that they are required to receive under the statutes.
Sure.
So just to be clear, they want people who have questions about this somehow think that because a child is participating in an education freedom account, that it somehow takes money away from public education. That is not the case. The public education system receives every dollar that it is statutorily due for education.
For the number of students that they.
That's right,
that
because
are- that are
the schools
participating.
are paid for the number of students that are educated, and they receive all of the money that they are due. And the education freedom account students, which cost 25% of the other students for taxpayers, are receiving all of the money that they are due.
So what was the answer to the question, though, about what you would like to see?
So what I would like to see, and it comes back to really the theme of the evening tonight, which is what we are here to talk about, our school choice, so that students have the right educational setting so that they can succeed. What I want to see is students who are not harmed when we put them into an educational setting that does not help them. What I want to see is a 30-year trend where the students at the bottom of our performance charts are falling farther and farther behind because they're not being served by the system that we've put them in. And so those are the things that I want to see happen.
If I could just
Sure.
add
Sure, thank you.
where I see the program going, I'm not sure, but it doesn't depend on me or the commissioner. It depends on you all. It depends on parents, what they want. This is grassroots. This is live free or die in New Hampshire, right? It depends on the parents, what they want and what they think is best for their children, whether that's the current public school, a different public school, a charter school, an education freedom account. It depends on what parents want and what they think their children need.
And is it correct, Commissioner Edelblut, that you are requesting 30 million for next year? Is that correct?
That's
In terms of
correct.
what you're anticipating?
Yes.
Because so far we've spent 20,000,
So we have
7
requested
million.
in our budget request, we have $30 million in there, and in our budget request in addition included an expansion and availability of that program. Because as you know, right now, that program is only available to economically disadvantaged households. So households that are making 300% of the federal poverty level or below. And so in our budget proposal, we did recommend that that program, and this would be up to the legislature to do that, that students who are homeless, students who are migrant students, students who are foster students, students who have disabilities, students who are persistently bullied, students who are in persistently dangerous schools, students of military veterans, that the program be expanded to include those. And so then we do think that given the number of families who are choosing this as an educational option will continue to grow and continue to meet the needs of families and save taxpayers funding.
And is it accurate that most of the money so far has gone to religious schools? And
Many of the parents have chosen parochial schools in the state to send their students, correct?
and I think I read something about Amazon.com. It's getting quite a bit of
Okay,
money.
so,
Can you
so,
explain
so
that?
Mi-
And
Ms.
then
Hutchinson,
finish.
we're getting quite far afield.
So but let me just, so there
I
is
don't
plenty
think
of
we're
info.
too far afield. I think he's specifically, we're talking about choice.
Yeah, happy
And
to answer the
education
question.
accounts are about choice.
Yeah,
We're
they
not
are.
on the market.
So happy to spill it. So there are many of the expenditures are to Amazon. Maybe this is unclear, but so in the schooling, mostly the schools, the students who are in their education freedom account are spending that money on education materials.
Understand that.
Amazon is a big provider of books. We use a lot of books in schools. And so that would be probably the driver behind that. But what I can also tell you is that anytime that a family buys something from Amazon, those receipts are reviewed. They are validated in terms of making sure that they are legitimate educational materials, and that is what is being reimbursed.
Do you know if
So,
any have been rejected?
yes,
Yes.
many
So-
times.
Yes.
So
for
hold
sure.
on,
Thank
hold on. So yeah, thank you. Because right now we're at about 7 more minutes of Q&A, which is nice. The time has flown by very nicely. So does anyone else have any further questions that hasn't that? Yeah, and certainly seconds are allowed, but we want to make sure everybody gets a first bite of the apple first, please.
Hi, my name is Virginia Avery and I'm a Deerfield resident. I was hoping you can talk a little bit about that, the 10%, which is on the outside of the contract where 90% would have to go to our school of choice and 10% would have to show, I forget the word, like hardship or something in order to be allowed to use that school money to go to another choice. And I was hoping you can just elaborate on what would be considered hardship or who would be eligible, how would you apply and be considered to be part of that 10% to choose a different school?
So mostly that belongs to you all because it's part of your contract, but I believe what they're referring to is a manifest education hardship in RSA 193.3.
So let me just flesh it a little bit. So the current contract says it will send 90%, a guaranteed at least 90% of students to Concord public, right, let me finish. 90% of students, public school students to Concord High, leaving 10% to potentially go somewhere else. If a child comes out of the public school system, right? So if I say, well, I'm not sending my kid there and I send him somewhere else, they're no longer part of the 100%. The 100% is public school students, high school students from Deerfield. The current contract and the contract that's proposed both have a clause to guarantee 90%. If we only sent 80% of our public school students to Concord, Concord could bill us for the 10% that we missed, right?
Yep. And I understand that. I'm asking for clarity on how could you become part of the 10%?
Perfect.
Thank you.
Please.
So again, I don't know the agreement, but I'm assuming that it's referring to a section in statute 193.3 manifest education hardship, whereby a parent would make an application to the school board well,
Goes to the superintendent now.
and
First.
Okay,
under best
first.
interest.
Yeah, exactly.
Under best
Well,
interest. it
best
goes-
interest, it goes superintendent.
Right.
Oh, okay, sorry, my apologies.
That's okay. So there's two processes.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
right.
Then we have manifest education hardship, which ultimately will go to your school board, and they would make a determination that there is a hardship. And it's odd in the law that the parent has to demonstrate to the school board that it's a hardship for my student to have to go to the assigned public school. And if the school board agrees with that, then they can tuition that child they can be part of that 10%. They would be able to allow them to tuition to another school. And they would not be limited in terms of where they go. They could assign that child to any school in the state and even to an out-of-state school. There's another process, which is in the best interest of a child, whereby a superintendent may determine that it's in the best interest of a child to be educated outside of the traditional public school that they would be assigned by their zip code, and they too could be assigned to another school. I don't know your contract to know if both of those processes are wrapped up in that 10% or one of those is.
Is there an outline somewhere that shows, what would be considered hardship so that everybody may feel that it's a hardship, but parents who may be interested in applying should this contract go through and want to apply to be part of the 10% who can then go use another school? Is there guidelines about what hardship might look like for children or how you would qualify?
There are, in addition to the statute, there are rules that you can find on our website.
Okay, thank you.
So to flesh that, and while he's looking, and if he finds it, I'll yield. If you send an email to my legislative address,
Mhm.
I'd be, and make that request, I'd be more than happy to point you in the direction of those resources.
Yeah, rather than if you're here afterwards, I'm happy to sit here and find it.
Oh, sure.
But I'll just say this. So I'm not talking about the contract now. I just want to say something about manifest educational hardship. It's hard to get.
Okay.
It's really hard. It's way harder than I think it should be. And I know because I'm like a dissenting vote on this often when it comes up. But I just want to make that clear. It's not like you wake up on a Wednesday and you're like, oh, they keep serving peanut butter and I'm not, it's hard. It is a high bar. There has to be something basically wrong.
Okay.
And I just want to make that clear.
Right. And if your local school board denies your application for manifest education hardship, you can appeal that to the State Board of Education for their determination.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Greg Whitmore, Deerfield resident. So I'm 17 years into a public teaching career and looking down at another 20 in front of me. So looking forward to it. My question is, there's always a concern when we talk about school choice, especially when we look at the past history of Deerfield. As other people have brought up, they say, well, we need a school of record. Okay. And I was hoping that you could clarify if school of record is even, a legal term, I guess, or is it just something that really means, a school that you are contracted with that has said they could take all of your students if needed?
Yeah. So, I'll try to answer this question because I've heard this question before. I don't have any information about what an official definition of what a school of record is. So we have district schools, we have assigned schools, but we don't have something as a school of record that I'm aware of.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. I just wanted clarification.
If,
All right.
if I could, I've got the statutes for area agreements, which I think is what you have, and there's nothing in the definition section for a school of record.
Yeah, for the record.
Yeah, we've heard that term
we
before,
do
but
not have an area agreement. We are not in an area agreement. But we do hear the term tossed around a lot of, we have to have a school of record. And people ask, well, what is that? And I too can find it neither in RSA nor in ed rules. So I think that's what precipitates the question.
thank you for your service as a teacher. Good luck
What
on
do
the
you
next
teach?
20 years.
What do you teach? What do you teach? Oh yeah,
Great.
I would have failed. Thank you. Science, kill me.
I too was a high school science teacher.
Oh God.
My name's Jim Eves. I'm from Deerfield since '84. So do the math. I know I was a school principal for 20 years. So my question is about transportation, and I'm real concerned. I was on the school board when the original contract was made with Concord back in, what was that done, 98? The reason was leverage, as Richard was talking about, except the leverage was reversed. The way we had no leverage. We needed to do something because we were concerned we didn't have enough seats. One of the big issues that we ran into, though, was transportation for kids. We had kids who couldn't get to school. We're a rural community. And I'd like to know if we're sending kids to all these different schools, how are we going to get them there? Is there legislation? Is there some work being done, Glenn, that's addressing this issue? Thank you.
Not specifically. We have transportation legislation related to career and technical education centers, getting kids to career and technical education centers. But in situations like this, with a contracted service, a tuition agreement to another school, I don't think that there is anything pending in terms of requiring public transportation by the sending school district.
It's a real concern. I know other parents have that concern. I can list kids on my, on my hands that ended up, quitting school because they just had no way to get in. And it shouldn't be up to the parents. And in fact, in Deerfield, the way it used to be when the history of choice is huge in Deerfield, there was no bus transportation provided. And it makes no sense. Why would we spend $19,000 per student to send them to school and then not get them there? So I want to hear that addressed before I can fully put my, thoughts behind this.
Yeah, we are looking at new models for school transportation with not the big yellow buses, but smaller vehicles that might be cheaper solutions in some cases.
Unfortunately, in our school district, we looked at that as well, and it was the same cost to run a van as it was a bus. But I just wanted to bring that up.
Right.
And my last, it's more of a comment, is I'm all about choice. I think it's a great thing. But I'm really concerned that this voucher program violates Article 6 of the New Hampshire Constitution. And I just don't understand how it can be going on with that being addressed. So thank you.
Hello, I'm Bobby Ann Dosty, and I've been a resident here since 2014. I don't know if this was addressed already, but with your with the education freedom accounts, with the concern in our community, could potentially people apply to the freedom account and use that for the high school? And can you speak to the process of how hard is that? I kind of elaborate.
So the application process for an EFA is fairly straightforward. There's an online application that you complete. You get adjudicated as to whether or not you're eligible for that program. When you're eligible for it, depending upon your qualifying criteria, you get different amounts of funds. Those funds are placed into a digital wallet. That digital wallet allows you to spend it on educational related expenses, which are validated. So if you go spend it on something that's not education related, they're going to refuse that. And then you are allowed under the law to take that to outside of your resident district to spend it on education in another public school. We have, so some of our other providers of education are other public schools. So you have families that are saying like, I want my child to have this educational experience. So they're using that to buy a course in a nearby public school that nobody else offered. And they're saying like, well, we think they do a really good job of that. We want to have that. And so that's where they're spending those funds. And so you're able to do that. Where you can't spend it is in your resident district.
Okay. And then, so, and you mentioned this before, I just want to clarify you have to be a certain income level. So if you were just over the cusp, you may not receive that. So it would be beneficial to have options like the school board would be.
Correct. If you're over the 300%, right. If you're over 300% of the federal poverty level, then you would not be eligible for an education freedom account. You would be eligible to the extent that the school board put in some type of a tuitioning program to participate.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Is there anybody else that hasn't had the opportunity to ask a question that would like to ask a question? Because we're very close to the end. Is there anybody? I know Ms. Cohen has a follow-up question, so if there's nobody else.
Okay.
Then they're gonna have to.
We'll go fast.
So
Yes.
yeah, they're gonna have to be very fast because I promised the
Lightning round.
selectmen we'd be done at 8:30 and so
Okay, mine will be
quick question, please.
Hi, again, Kendra Cohen from Deerfield.
Hi again.
Mine might be very fast because you may not be able to comment it on all. But so there's currently a lawsuit against the Department of Education for funding for EFAs. If the lawsuit is successful for the plaintiffs, is there a backup plan for the state to be able to pay for EFAs that they're promising to all these families?
So because there's pending litigation, I'm not able to comment on it.
I
Thank you.
thought that might be the case. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Sarah, for that question.
One last question.
Quick one. Ellen O'Donnell again. I also taught here for 18 years and I taught at a Catholic high school before that. So I think one of my questions is, I'm wondering about the in public schools, there's testing that is done and it's public and everybody knows all about it. And you even talked about in the very beginning, but in these private schools, they're not required in high school to take SATs. They're not required to take kneecaps. They're not required to do the different testing that public schools have to do. So I'm wondering about the accountability. So what's the accountability that you know that students that are either homeschooled or in public schools are getting the education they need? I personally know a family that was homeschooled and they were illiterate.
So we're pressed on time.
Yeah,
So
so
we're gonna-
that's
we'll
my
have
thing.
answer the question.
Accountability
Thank you.
for both homeschool and for private schools.
Great. So homeschool education actually has a higher degree of accountability than does the public school system. The non-public
Two that are
schools.
homeschool kids, and I don't see any accountability.
Okay.
So
Well, I mean, I can tell you that they do. I mean, by law, I can see the statutes, but, and then secondarily for non-public schools, what I can tell you is that they're in their Ed 400 rules, they have certain accountability measures that they have to meet. They're not the same accountability measures that we have at the public school level. And then I can tell you in the public school system, what we see is that we have an accountability system that is leaving a whole bunch of cohorts well far behind. So you question the degree of accountability if for decades we're leaving, large percentages of students not meeting the academic standards that we're interested in.
So I can find private schools and find testing results and see what their testing results are and compare them to public schools.
No, they don't. They have a different set of accountability requirements that are outlined in ED 400. It's not the same accountability system that the state has.
I just don't see how you see if those kids are being left behind
Okay.
as well.
So does
But
anybody else want to
that's it.
answer the question? Because we're very pressed for time.
We can continue debating.
Everybody's good. All right.
Okay.
So, because I promised to be done at 8:30 and keep on schedule. So I'd like to thank everybody for taking time out of your busy schedules and coming out to join us tonight for this interesting, engaging, and thoughtful discussion. I hope all of you got as much out of it as I did. It's always nice to have an opportunity to learn firsthand from experts on a topic. I'd like to thank the members of the Deerfield Select Board for allowing us the use of these facilities, especially Deerfield Selectman Will Hubner for providing us access to the building, help us set up and running the audio video equipment. His help is greatly appreciated. I'd like to thank the members of the Deerfield Deserved School Choice Ad Hoc Committee, Ms. Kim Black, Ms. Bobby Ann Dosty, Ms. Stacy Mascioni, Mr. Greg Whitmore, and their families for their tireless efforts in making tonight's event possible. I would also like to thank our esteemed panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules to make themselves available to us tonight. How about a nice big round of applause for our panelists, please? Please enjoy the rest of your evening and travel safe. Thank you. Good night and God bless.